Hi, my name is Vivek Anand and I'm a postdoc in the Ashton Grabiel Spatial Orientation Lab. And this video is going to be an introduction into how to do scientific literature search. Now, this is like my livelihood because this is what I do on a daily basis, but at the same time, I know I'm not like super efficient at this, so just take this as an introduction and then go to your favorite librarian and ask them to give you a more detailed next level searching capabilities. So this is just an introduction. I do work in spatial disorientation, and if you're interested in that, I'll put in the link, a playlist into my research, and you can check out the sort of things that I do. So, let me get to the bird's eye view of what I'm trying to do here. So this video is about scientific literature search, but it's going to be part of a multi-series. The next video will be on how do I read a scientific paper and how do I create a library that houses all of these scientific papers that I collect, and then how do I do idea generation. And then following that theme into video 3 that eventually I'll create will be on how do I develop a research idea that has never been done before since the beginning of human time. And this is kind of cool. A lot of science is really small incremental baby steps. But what's neat about those incremental baby steps, some of which can be very excruciating to take because it takes a long time to develop and grow and then collect data in a rigorous manner. But what's cool again is that it's new. Those steps are new. And so I can sort of teach you about how I do that. And then, the deeper idea of once you get a baby step that no one has taken before, how do you make sure that's a baby step that people will actually care about? And that's a lot tougher to do. So that'll be video 3. And then video 4 and beyond will be on how do I write research papers. So, the question may be like, well, why do I care about learning how to do a scientific literature search? And the first is that if you're thinking about going into academia or research, this is like a vital tool. So you have to be able to do this. But I also want to propose the idea that even if you're not going into academia, this is a valuable skill. And I actually use it for my artwork. So let me just give you a few examples, and I'll put links for these as well. So for example, this is my website. And for example, in my photography, if I go into insect photography, here's just like a rough draft example. This is a picture I took of my beautiful honeybee. I'm a beekeeper, and sadly she was being killed slowly by this assassin bug who takes poison and digestive elements from within its body and just vomits it into my poor bee, and that digests the bee inside the bee, and then the assassin bug slurps it back in. Now that's all information that you can get from Wikipedia, okay? But what you can't get from Wikipedia is this really interesting electron microscope view of the proboscis of this insect. So I just love finding insects in my backyard and then doing literature search and finding detailed stuff that I can't get anywhere else. I also do a lot of artwork for my mythological universe that sort of explores how ideas get into my subconscious. And to do that, I take motivation from a lot of science concepts. So I do a scientific literature review of herpes, and then I use it to model how things happen in my mythological universe. So in any case, these are just different examples of how you could use literature review for non-science or art type things. Okay, so I have done this sort of training with some first-year grad students, with a bunch of undergrads that maybe come and work with me because it's a critical skill to have to survive in a lab setting. And I've also done it in a high school setting, so I'll put a link for this too. But one of my prides and joys has been creating this course with my co-teacher Marissa, and we actually taught a course on an introduction to research at the high school level. And I still have to put all the content on here. So I've done that. This actual video that I'm developing is for this group over here. So this is a group of Brandeis undergrads, but also some high school students. It's open to everyone, so you're more than welcome to join. And we're learning how to, use microprocessors and attach sensors to them, but also do research in human augmentation. And so for them, I designed this video so that they can do literature search and develop ideas that no one has done before. So that's another group that we could look at. Okay, so step 0, before we even do your scientific literature review, what you want to do is a general search on the internet, especially if you have no knowledge in this field. The reason why I say it is that when you walk through scientific literature, you are going to become mired. And you are going to just get so overwhelmed, and it's not going to be a pleasant process. And sometimes what brings sanity in is if you have a holistic view of the field, and you have a few keywords and some comprehension of the jargon that people use. If you have that from before, it makes scientific literature searching a lot more pleasant and bearable. So let me just give you an example of that. Let's say you're really into cyborgs, because who isn't, right? So you go cyborg, you look into that online, and you can go into Wikipedia and you can start looking into, well, what have people thought about in this general topic? And you, let's just say, are interested in medicine. And so you start reading about all of that, and then within this, you see this somewhat jargony word, brain-computer interface. So you go into brain-computer interface. Now this is a term that you could put into scientific literature review. There's a lot on this. And so you start reading about what have different people done. You start getting, similarly jargony words like human augmentation and things like that. So now you've got some jargony words, you've got some meaning or understanding behind how this connects to the larger idea that you may be interested in. Okay, so once you've done that, you've got some general view of what there is. The next is to take these relevant keywords and go into databases. One of the most famous ones is PubMed, and PubMed has a biomedical slant to it. I use Google Scholar. It has has more general or has different fields also within it. There are a whole variety of other ones too that you could do. Now, before I go in and show you how to use these databases, there are two general types of articles, scientific articles, that you can look for. The first, which is what I recommend you look at first when you're initially beginning to wade into this scientific knowledge, are review articles. And review articles is when a science person goes and summarizes all the research up to that point. So this is really useful when you're first trying to understand the field. One of the things I should say is that usually the people that write review articles are people that are very active in the field, so it makes sense that they write these review articles. But sometimes what they can do, understandably, is cite a lot of their own work, and so they're providing you a perspective that is biased in their journey and something that highlights their research. So again, what I recommend is try to get review articles from a few different groups. Now, if you pick a very niche, like a very specific topic, there may not be a review article on that. Usually review articles are only for larger, more umbrella term keywords and things like that. So just keep some of these things in your mind, and just try to read several so you have a larger viewpoint. The second type of articles are research articles, and these are articles that are very specific to one experiment that someone has done. So to get a big picture now, you have to read dozens, hundreds of papers, because some of these papers are very specific to the experiment that they did, and you may not be able to generalize those findings to something beyond that one experiment. So these, you really need to acquire a lot of them to get the big picture. Okay, so there you go. Let me just give you an example of how you now search for it. So let's say I go to PubMed. So I go to PubMed and I do brain-computer interface. That's my jargony word. And if you scroll down over here, you can just select review article, and it's going to just give you review articles. And so that's one way to find review articles. If you go to Google Scholar, you can do the same thing. They don't have a filter, unfortunately. So if you do brain-computer interface, you actually have to write review in the search. Sometimes you have the word review in the title, but sometimes you don't. So this is not always the best way to search, but in this case it has worked. So now you've got all of these articles. Now your next question might be like, okay, you found these articles, but how do you figure out which one to download? Now what I do is I just go and I look for the abstract. And the way that you do that is you can click on any of them, and well, I guess this just brought you directly. But you can go to, for example, this one, and you have an abstract, and this is just a summary of what this paper is going to talk about. And because I have a knowledge base that's many, many years deep, I can just look at an abstract and bam, I can usually decide pretty quickly, almost at an emotional level, that I want to read this or I don't want to read it. But you may not have that years and years of developing your own personal intuition. So in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out what to do, and these aren't necessarily best advice, but one thing that you could do is, as you're like, oh, which of these papers do I read? Some of the papers that are cited a lot, they may be important papers because a lot of other authors have been like, oh, I'm going to cite this paper. So you may gravitate initially towards papers that are cited a lot. One thing to keep in mind is obviously papers that have just recently been published, they haven't had time to acquire enough citations. So, just realize that if it's a new paper, it's okay if it doesn't have a lot of citations. You do want to be able to read a few papers that are current, because depending on which field you are in, sometimes the field can change rapidly. Okay, so get some current papers. The other thing that you could do, and again, this is semi-controversial, is that within the science world, there are journals, and journals are rated on how high impact factor they are. So you can go and you can type in to your search engine high impact factor journal for like neuroscience or biology or whatever, and you might get like journals like Nature or Science, and these are high impact papers, journals, and you can assume that papers that are in there will typically have passed some level of rigor. And so you can gravitate towards those initially, although some of my favorite papers have not been published in high impact journals. So as you build your intuition, you'll get a better sense of what's good and what's not. Now the next question is, okay, you found some papers, you really like them, how do you download them? And some, and many, are actually freely available, which is really cool. But many are behind a paywall, which is kind of sad. So if you look over here, usually these links on the right are links to the free PDF. And for this particular, because this is a big topic, you can see a lot of these are free. So you just click on them, you can download them then, and you've got this really awesome research article here for free, which is really cool. Some of them will be behind a paywall, like for example, this one over here. So you'll go there, say PDF, you'll click on it, but you can't get it. And you can buy it, but that's expensive, especially if you're trying to get a whole library of these. So some ways around it, you can copy the title, put it into a normal search engine, and sometimes these papers can be freely available on the actual author's personal website, because sometimes they'll put it there. That's what I do. Sometimes the author will have a ResearchGate and they'll freely make that available. Sometimes that's not going to be an option, so you can try contacting the author, although that usually doesn't work these days. People are just too busy. You can ask someone that has access to a university, and that university may subscribe to that journal. You can get beyond that paywall that way, or you can pirate it. And I haven't done pirating just because I have access to Brandeis's subscription, but it's an option. Okay, so now you've downloaded your paper. The next thing, just really quickly, that I want to talk about is that, when you're doing this and you've got a whole bunch of journals, you do want to cite it eventually. So if you go to these quotation marks here in Google Scholar, they provide, pre-citations, so you can just copy and paste this into a document. I use a software called EndNote, which allows me in Word, Microsoft Word, as I'm typing, to embed these citations. This will be relevant for the future, but I thought I'd just put all of these things in right now so you sort of know that it's there. Okay, what else? And the final topic is that as you begin to build your library, and this will be for the next video, how do you find more papers that are relevant? And there are really two ways to do this. The first is that you go to a paper, that you like, you go to the PDF right over here, maybe you download it, you're reading it, you're highlighting it, and you're trying to find interesting papers that you like. So, you may go there and you may be like, ooh, I really like, I'm just trying to find a citation over here. This one, maybe I'll go to a different one, whatever. I'll just go to a different one. some of the citations are obvious, some of them are not. Okay, so here, you're going through and you're like, ooh, I really like this sentence right over here. I wonder what kind of experiment or what it's referring to. So then you go and bam, right over here, you have the citation. So I can copy this. Now I can go and search for these specific papers and learn about it. So that's one way of gaining more papers. The other way that you can gain more papers is you can go through and you can see who has cited them. So this person has been cited 400 times. So you go through, you look at these papers, some of them you'll download. What I do is initially when I'm entering in, I'll go through all of those abstracts, okay? All of them, and read them and download the ones I like. Then you go through and you're like, ooh, I'm gonna see who cited them and who cited these people, right? And it can get really pretty insane because you're going down this rabbit hole and you're just downloading more and more papers. And this can really be a journey of like a month, you know, when you're building your library. So it can be a long, long journey. But by the end of it, you become a mini expert in the field, and that's what allows you to develop ideas that people haven't done before. Okay, so that's the end of this video.